I'm Amanda, 32, and up until last month, I believed my marriage to Brian was flawless. 5 years together, 3 of them married, and never in my wildest dreams did I think our annual family vacation would shatter that illusion. When we arrived at the resort, my in-laws placed me at a separate table for dinner. No one spoke to me. When I asked Brian why, he just shrugged. "That's just how they are." I forced a smile and said, "Perfect. I've got my own way too." The next morning, everything changed. But before I continue, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe to follow my journey of self-discovery. Looking back now, I should have noticed the signs. But when you're in love, you ignore the red flags waving in your face. Brian and I met 6 years ago at my college roommate's wedding. I was the maid of honor. He was one of the groomsmen. Total cliche, right? But our connection was anything but typical. Brian stood out, smart, compassionate, ambitious, and when he looked at me, it was like I was the only one there. I was 26, finally gaining traction in my marketing career after years of slogging through junior roles. I'd just been promoted to marketing manager at a tech startup in Seattle, proud of my independence. Dating wasn't even on my radar until Brian came along. Our first conversation lasted 5 hours. We closed out the wedding, then sat in the hotel lobby until 3 a.m., still talking. He asked thoughtful questions about my goals and actually listened to the answers. We both loved hiking, indie films, and shared similar values about life and family. Brian called the next day. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. He was 29, already excelling in finance, the eldest son of the Caldwell family, old money, Boston-based. Later, I'd learned that the Caldwells owned properties all over New England. That kind of generational wealth that never gets openly discussed but is obvious in everything, from their beach houses to the charities they casually mentioned supporting. I met his parents, Margaret and Richard, 3 months in. They visited Seattle. Right away, something felt off. Margaret's eyes scanned me like a resume. Her questions were sharp, focused on my background. My parents are small-town Oregon teachers, not exactly impressive by Caldwell standards. When I brought up my work, Richard nodded politely, then turned the conversation back to Brian's latest business success. Still, Brian seemed different, warmer, more grounded. Afterward, he apologized. "They're just traditional," he said. "They'll come around." A year and a half after we met, we got married. I wanted something intimate, but Margaret had other ideas. Suddenly, our 75-person guest list ballooned to over 200 strangers. I had 1 bridesmaid. Brian had 5 groomsmen, all prep school friends. When I raised concerns, Brian gently encouraged me to just go with the flow. "Let's keep the peace," he'd say. My own family, my parents Karen and David, couldn't have been more different. They welcomed Brian instantly. My younger sister Jessica joked with him like they'd known each other for years. Our home was full of warmth, honesty, and mutual respect. During our first year of marriage, Brian protected me from his parents' passive digs. He filtered their messages, only relaying the nice things. We lived far from Boston, building a home in Seattle. I focused on supporting Brian's career, hosting dinners for his colleagues, decorating our condo, building a cozy life. My own career thrived. I became marketing director, leading a team of 5. Brian traveled often, but we made time count. Weekend getaways, surprise date nights. Our marriage looked solid, enviable even. We talked about starting a family. Brian wanted to wait until the timing was right. One tradition we couldn't skip? The annual Caldwell family vacation. We dodged it the first 2 years. Once because of my work, then because of his travel. But this year, we had no excuse. Richard was retiring as CEO of Caldwell Investments, passing the role to Brian's younger brother, James. The entire Caldwell clan would gather at an elite resort in the Hamptons to celebrate. "It's just a week," Brian told me while packing. "Dad's stepping down. We need to be there." I smiled and nodded, ignoring the unease growing in my gut. If only I'd known. The Hamptons welcomed us with pristine weather, sunny skies, 75 degrees, ocean breeze. Our resort, the Ocean View, lived up to the hype. groomed gardens, private beaches, and suites bigger than our first apartment. As our taxi pulled up to the circular drive, I spotted the family already on the veranda. Margaret, flawless in white linen, noticed us first. Her smile faltered when she saw me. "Darling," she said to Brian, pulling him in for a warm hug. She turned to me next. "Amanda, you made it." Richard barely nodded in my direction before slapping Brian's back. "Perfect timing. James was just updating us on the Anderson acquisition." In seconds, Brian was swept into a business conversation. I stood off to the side with our luggage. No one offered help. Then I heard a voice behind me. "Let me show you your room." It was Stephanie, Brian's younger sister. At 30, she was the only Caldwell I ever truly clicked with. "They'll be talking shop all night," she said. As we walked through the grand lobby, she caught me up on the guest list. James and his wife Allison, their 2 kids, Michael, the youngest brother, and his fiancée Grace, Uncle George, and Aunt Patricia, cousins Emily and Thomas with their spouses. "Quite the reunion," I said, trying to stay upbeat. Stephanie gave a tight smile. "Fair warning. Mom planned every second of this week. It's intense." Our suite was luxurious. Ocean view, king bed, spa amenities. But I barely had time to freshen up before Stephanie reminded me dinner was in 30 minutes. "Don't be late," she said. "Dad hates that." I slipped into a navy sundress, touched up my makeup, and met Brian in the suite's lounge. He was texting James. "Ready?" I asked, fixing his collar. He smiled. "You look beautiful." Then kissed my cheek. "Let's get this over with." The private dining room was set with 2 long tables. Margaret waved Brian toward the one where the whole family was already seated. I moved to follow. She raised a hand. "Amanda, dear, we've arranged for you to sit at that table," she said, gesturing to a smaller one by the window. "We're quite cramped over here with everyone catching up." I froze, stunned. Her? Certain I misunderstood. The family table had 3 open seats. "I'm sorry, space reasons," Richard said, eyes glued to the menu. "We need to discuss private family matters." I turned to Brian, expecting him to say something. He looked back and forth, clearly torn. "It's just for tonight," he said quietly. "Dad wants to talk retirement stuff." "But your cousins' spouses are sitting there," I pointed out, glancing at Emily's husband and Thomas's wife, both deeply engaged in conversation. "They've been in the family longer," Margaret said smoothly. "They're familiar with our business affairs. 3 years of marriage. How much longer did I need to be in the family?" I forced a laugh. "Surely there's room for one more. I promise I won't take up much space." No one laughed. Silence, thick and awkward. "Amanda," Brian said gently, but with a warning edge. I swallowed my pride, stood, and walked to the smaller table alone. The entire dinner, I picked at my food and watched their table, laughing, talking, alive. No one even looked at me. Later, that night in our suite, I finally snapped. "What the hell was that? I've never felt more humiliated." Brian loosened his tie. "It's not a big deal. Emily's husband works for Dad's company. It's confidential." "And what about tomorrow? Am I invisible again then too?" Brian sighed, running his hand through his hair. "Can we not do this right now? I'm tired." "Do what? Ask why your parents treat me like a ghost?" "You're overreacting," he said. "It's just seating." I tried to explain, but he kept brushing me off until, "This week isn't about you. It's about Dad's retirement." "Can we not make it dramatic?" His words hit like a slap. I retreated to the bathroom, silently crying as I removed my makeup. In the mirror, I saw a stranger, a woman reduced to pleading for basic respect. I made a silent promise. Tomorrow I'd try again, be friendly, be gracious, find common ground. How naive. Sunlight spilled through the curtains the next morning. I got dressed with extra care. White capris, coral blouse, a light touch of makeup. Brian smiled as we walked to breakfast. His hand rested on my back. My hope lasted 90 seconds. "Brian, your father saved you a seat," Margaret called. "One big table and a smaller one again. Mine." Brian gave my hand a squeeze, then joined them. No argument. No glance back. I stood frozen until a kind server led me to the side table. Coffee, ma'am? Yes. Thank you. My voice barely rose above a whisper. I sat and watched. Margaret pulled out printed itineraries. The ladies will go shopping today, she announced. We've got 3 boutiques and lunch at Lo Bernardine. My ears perked up. Finally, something I could join. Allison, Grace, Patricia, Emily, Stephanie, you too, yes? Stephanie looked up and nodded. My name wasn't mentioned. I wasn't included. As breakfast ended, Brian walked over. We've got golf with Dad. You good on your own? Your mom planned shopping. Was I supposed to be invited? He looked uncomfortable. That's their tradition. Been doing it for years. And when do I become part of the tradition? He glanced at his watch. Why don't you hit the spa? Treat yourself. He kissed my head and walked off. Alone again, I wandered to the beach. The resort's private shore was quiet. I sat far from everyone and stared at the sea. Drink, ma'am? I looked up. A resort staffer, Caitlin. It's early, but yes. Rum, please. She smiled and returned with a piña colada. First. Time here? That obvious? I said. I'm here with my husband's family, but I didn't make the activity cut. She raised an eyebrow. Classic old money move. I've seen everything. You're in passive-aggressive purgatory. I actually laughed. If you need anything, she whispered, ask for me. Allies help. Later, I called Rachel. They did. What? She said, furious. Separate table, 3 years married. What did Brian say? Nothing that mattered. Rachel sighed. This isn't okay. Talk to him. Really talk to him. I've tried. Honey, that's not a way. That's them being terrible. I hung up and tried to enjoy my solitude. Swam, read, tanned. Around 2, the Caldwells returned. The men from golf, the women from shopping, they gathered on the beach. I debated, then walked over, acting confident. How was golf? I asked, placing my towel beside Brian's. James replied, Good. Dad beat us all. I smiled. And shopping? Find anything nice? I asked. Margaret barely looked at me. The boutiques were divine. Stephanie found a stunning summer dress. I turned to Stephanie, hopeful. She avoided my eyes and began applying sunscreen like it was urgent. Before I could try again, Richard announced dinner plans. Private dining room again, special menu for Dad's retirement. Will there be speeches? Allison James's wife asked. Brief ones, Margaret said. Richard dislikes long-winded tributes. The conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. I tried to chime in about Brian's public speaking skills, but Patricia cut me off with a story about another family event. After 30 painful minutes, I faked a headache and left. No one, not even Brian, seemed to care. Dinner that evening was déjà vu. Me at the outsiders' table, them laughing together like I didn't exist. The only difference was, this time I was ready. It didn't sting any less. Brian came to our suite late, slightly tipsy. You left early, he said, undoing his tie. Did I? I was 8 feet from you for 3 hours. He sighed. Amanda, please, it was Dad's night. It's been 2 days. No one speaks to me. Your mom acts like I'm invisible and you let her. What do you expect me to do? Start drama at my dad's retirement? I want you to admit this is wrong. I want my husband to defend me. Brian's jaw tensed. Can't you just adapt? For 1 week? This matters to me. And that's when I understood. It mattered to him. Not my dignity, not my feelings, just my silence. I see, I said softly. He misread it as agreement. Good. Let's sleep. He dozed off fast. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, I questioned everything. Had I missed the signs? Was love blinding me to what was obvious? A husband who'd always choose his family's approval over my value. A future as a forever outsider. Sleep never came. The 3rd morning of our trip dawned clear and sunny, but I felt none of it. Brian was gone. A note on his pillow. Early breakfast with Dad, business stuff. I moved slowly, dreading another day of being ignored. When I arrived at the terrace, they were already eating. Only Stephanie gave me a faint smile, then looked back at her phone. Still, I approached. "Good morning," Margaret's voice sliced through. "We've already ordered, Amanda. You'll need to get your own server." I froze. No one blinked. No one called out her rudeness, not even Brian. I walked to my usual table, cheeks on fire. A server came quickly. Her sympathetic glance said it all. She'd seen. As I started on eggs and berries, I realized I was mostly hidden behind a tall plant. I could see the family and, accidentally, hear everything. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. But then, "I just don't get what Brian sees in her," Margaret said. Her voice was hushed but clear. "No family ties, no assets. That marketing job she brags about, not impressive." "She tries too hard," Richard added. "No natural grace." I froze. My fork hung in the air. "How long do you think this'll last?" came another voice. "Uncle George? The Prescott girl's still unmarried," he continued. "Her dad says she still asks about Brian." "Don't start," Brian said. But he didn't sound angry, just tired. "Amanda is my wife." "For now," Margaret replied coolly. "Marriages can be undone, especially with no kids yet. At least you've waited on that," she added. "We're just getting settled," Brian said vaguely. "Thank goodness for that," Margaret said. "Makes things cleaner when you finally come to your senses." The conversation moved on, but I couldn't hear any of it. There was only a roar in my ears. I sat frozen, chilled despite the sun. They were talking about ending my marriage like it was just logistics. And Brian? He hadn't really defended me. A single tired line. Then silence. Fled to the nearest restroom, barely making it into a stall before the sobs took over. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The pain was sharp and physical, like someone had reached into my chest and crushed my heart. "Are you okay in there?" came a gentle knock. I recognized Caitlin's voice, but I couldn't speak through my tears. "I'm coming in, all right?" My door opened. It hadn't even occurred to me to lock it. Caitlin knelt beside me. "Hey, deep breaths, you're having a panic attack." She helped guide my breathing until it slowed. Then, the whole awful story spilled out. The separate seating, the isolation, the conversation I'd overheard. "That's more than cruel," Caitlin said, offering another tissue. "No one deserves that." The worst part? Brian knows. He's watching it all happen and doing nothing. My phone buzzed. It was Jessica, my sister. She'd sent a photo from my parents' anniversary last month. Brian and I were at the center, surrounded by my family, everyone smiling. They'd embraced him like he was one of their own. And in return, his family treated me like a trespasser. That night's dinner was formal, celebrating Richard's decades at Caldwell Investments. I'd spent the afternoon alone, drifting between crying and fuming. I'd considered pretending to be sick just to avoid it. But no, I wasn't giving them the satisfaction. I wore my best dress, a sleek black sheath I could barely afford, and applied flawless makeup. If I was going to be excluded, I'd look damn good doing it. The private room was elegant, decorated for the occasion. A slideshow of Richard's achievements played on the wall. I was once again directed to sit alone, this time even farther from the family table. Midway through dinner, Richard stood for a speech. He talked of legacy, tradition, and the strength of the Caldwell name. "I've been blessed with 3 wonderful sons who know what it means to be a Caldwell," he said, raising a toast to Brian, James, and Michael. "And I look forward to the next generation carrying that legacy." Then he paused, scanning the room before his eyes flicked briefly to me. "Of course," he added, "it's not just about having children, it's about having the right kind of children with the right kind of background, quality over quantity, as we say in investments." It was so obvious, even some relatives shifted uncomfortably. "Brian?" He chuckled at the comment. I was stunned. It wasn't exclusion anymore. It was open disrespect. Later in our suite, I confronted him. "Did you hear what your father said? That was a direct insult. At me, at my family. Brian loosened his tie and sighed. He was talking about investment strategy, Amanda. Not everything revolves around you. You can't be serious? He looked right at me when he said it. You're being paranoid. This week's already stressful. Don't create drama. Drama? They've isolated me, put me at a separate table, excluded me from every plan. Your mom literally discussed ending our marriage at breakfast. His face shifted, annoyance turning to alarm. You were eavesdropping? I was eating breakfast. Your mother talked openly about replacing me with some Prescott girl. He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. Look, my parents are traditional. They have expectations. They'll come around. It's been 3 years, Brian. When? He shrugged, helpless. It's just their way. You'll have to get used to it. Those words, so casual, so dismissive, broke something inside me. This man, my husband, was telling me to quietly accept being disrespected. I inhaled slowly. Strangely, I felt calm. Perfect, I said, smiling for the first time that day. I have my way too. Brian looked relieved. Great. Let's just sleep and reset tomorrow. He got ready for bed, unaware that everything had changed. While he drifted off, I lay wide-eyed. The clock read 1:27 a.m., then 2:15, then 3:08. I mentally revisited our entire relationship. How had I missed the signs? His hesitation to defend me, the way my concerns were brushed aside, how his family's approval always came first. On our second date, he'd canceled dinner plans because his mother called with a last-minute invite. I'd thought it sweet at the time. At our wedding, I'd wanted a simple ceremony in my parents' backyard. Instead, we had a lavish Boston event with his family's business connections. My parents looked out of place, but never complained. Even our home. I'd fallen for a cozy craftsman in Seattle, but Brian insisted on a sterile penthouse in the financial district. It matched our status, he'd said. His status. And when it came to starting a family, he always found a reason to delay. Money, travel, work stress. Was it because his parents didn't see me as suitable? As these realizations hit me, the hurt shifted into something sharper, clarity, and with clarity came resolve. I wouldn't keep being their scapegoat. I wouldn't stay silent, begging for respect, and I definitely wasn't staying married to a man who refused to stand by me. I slipped out of bed and grabbed my phone. My first call was to my mom. Despite the hour, she picked up immediately. Amanda, is everything okay? Her voice cracked my composure. I sobbed as I told her everything. Oh, sweetheart, she said gently. I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this. Am I overreacting? Expecting too much? Absolutely not. Family doesn't treat people like this, and a husband should never let it happen. I don't think I can do it anymore. After a moment of silence, she said, Whatever you decide, we're here. You can come home anytime. Her unconditional love steadied me. After hanging up, I started planning. First, I checked flights. Seattle, 2 p.m. the next day. Seats were still available. I didn't book. Yet. Next, I looked up hotels. The Montauk Point Resort had a last-minute deluxe suite available. It was pricey, but I didn't care. I booked it on my card, the one Brian didn't have access to. Then I transferred my portion of our shared savings to my private account. Not everything, just what I'd earned, what I was owed. We'd divide the rest later. But I needed security now. By 5 a.m., I had my plan. I began packing, leaving out only what I'd need for the morning. As I zipped my suitcase, I found the anniversary card Brian had given me just 2 months ago. To my perfect partner, the love of my life. The words felt hollow. Around 6:30, I heard Brian stirring. I quickly closed the suitcase and slid it. I slid the suitcase into the closet and headed into the bathroom for a shower. When I emerged, Brian was scrolling through his emails. You're up early, he muttered, eyes never leaving his screen. Couldn't sleep. I'm heading out to grab coffee. He nodded without looking up. I'm golfing with Dad and the guys again. Mom's organized spa treatments for the ladies. You should go. The irony nearly made me laugh. Now he wanted me to join activities I hadn't been invited to all week. I'll think about it. I made my way to the resort lobby, spotting Caitlin just starting her morning shift. "Good morning," she said, then leaned in. "You look like a woman on a mission." "I am. I need a favor." 20 minutes later, I'd laid out the full plan. Caitlin not only agreed to help, she introduced me to the resort manager. Once he heard my story, he didn't hesitate. "We pride ourselves on making every guest feel welcome," he said. "What you're asking is absolutely doable." With their assistance, I arranged everything. A discreet bellhop would retrieve my luggage while the family was at breakfast. Transportation to Montauk Point Resort would be on standby. Brian's new room, under his name only, would be booked and charged to our existing bill. When I returned to our suite, Brian was dressed and tapping his watch. "I'm heading to breakfast. Everyone's probably already down. I'll join you in a bit. Just need to finish getting ready." Once he left, I dressed deliberately. Crimson sheath dress, the one that always made me feel fierce. Pearl, earrings from Grandma, bold red lipstick. I left a note on Brian's pillow. "Joining you for breakfast. We need to talk." As I walked toward the dining terrace, I felt strangely calm. 3 days of rejection had forged an unshakable certainty. I paused at the entrance, breathed in, shoulders back. The Caldwells were at their usual table. My separate table, once again, stood off to the side. Not today. I walked in, conversations hushed. Maybe it was the dress or my posture, but all eyes followed me. I headed straight to their table. "Good morning," I said, voice clear and even. "I hope you don't mind, but I've made some changes to today's arrangements." Brian frowned. "Amanda, what are you—" I raised a hand. "No, let me finish. 3 days ago, I would have never dared, but that Amanda was gone for 3 days. I've been seated away from this table, excluded from activities, treated like an intruder. I made eye contact with each of them. At first, I was hurt, then furious. Now I'm just done." Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Amanda, this is hardly—" "No, Richard. This is exactly the time and place. I overheard your conversation yesterday." I turned to Margaret. "All of it. How I'm not good enough. How some Prescott girl would make a better wife. How lucky it is we don't have kids yet, so it's easier to annul the marriage." Margaret turned pale. Others looked away. "I've taken notes this whole vacation on how you treat people you think are beneath you. The cruelty you wrap in tradition. How you've raised your sons to value legacy over decency." Then I looked at Brian. "And I've especially taken notes on the man I married. A man who let his wife be humiliated for 3 days and told her to get used to it." Brian hissed. "Amanda, you're making a scene." "No, Brian. For the first time, I'm making a stand." I pulled a key from my purse and placed it on the table. "This is to your new room. You'll be staying here tonight. I've booked myself into Montauk Point Resort. Alone." He stared at the key. "You're leaving?" "I'm choosing myself. Something I should have done the first time your mother seated me away from the family and you said nothing." Margaret snapped. "Brian, control your wife." That did it. That's the problem, Margaret. You think wives should be controlled? Not loved, not respected, controlled. I looked at Brian again. "You've got a choice. Decide what kind of man you want to be, whether you care more about your marriage or your parents' approval. I'll be at Montauk Point until tomorrow afternoon. If I matter to you, you'll find me." Silence. Some faces horrified. A few, like Stephanie and Allison, looked proud. Brian finally stood. "You can't just walk out on our vacation, on our marriage." "I'm not walking out, Brian. I'm offering you one final chance to prove we have a marriage." "A real one?" I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Richard. Congratulations on your retirement. I hope the legacy you're so proud of is worth the cost." I exited the terrace with my head high. In the lobby, Caitlin gave a small thumbs up. A bellhop approached. "Your car is ready, ma'am." My bags were already in the sleek black SUV. As we pulled away, I saw Brian rush outside looking panicked. For a second, I faltered. I wanted to run back, fix it all. But then I remembered, control your wife. the right kind of background. It's just their way. I faced forward, never looked back. The 20-minute drive gave me space to breathe. Maybe I'd burned a bridge. Maybe I hadn't. But for the first time in years, I felt whole. Not Brian Caldwell's wife. Not the outsider begging for acceptance. Just Amanda, strong, clear, unapologetically deserving. Montauk Point was stunning, less pretentious, more peaceful. My suite overlooked the Atlantic. A chilled champagne bottle awaited. The note read, "Compliments of the management. Here's to new beginnings." I spent the day embracing radical peace. Massage, balcony lunch, a barefoot walk on the beach, phone off. By sunset, I finally turned it back on. 12 missed calls. Texts from Brian, shifting from rage to desperation. Also messages from Rachel and Jessica. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you," Rachel wrote. "Your in-laws sound like villains." Dinner was room service, alone under the stars. At 9, a knock. I thought maybe Brian, but it was just a resort staff member. Holding a package, "Delivery for you, Mrs. Caldwell." Inside the gift bag from the resort boutique was a journal and pen with a note from Caitlin. "For recording the next chapter. Your speech this morning inspired everyone on staff who's ever been treated as less than. Thank you." I smiled, touched by the gesture. Caitlin was a stranger, yet she'd shown me more kindness than Brian's family ever had. I slept deeply that night, dreamless, and woke to sunlight and the rhythmic sound of waves. For breakfast, I took my coffee down to the beach, watching early. Morning swimmers break the calm surface. My phone showed more missed calls from Brian, but among them was a text from Stephanie. "I admire what you did. I've never had the courage to stand up to them like that." Around noon, as I debated lunch options, there was another knock at my door. Brian. He looked terrible, unshaven with dark circles under his eyes, still in yesterday's clothes. "How did you find me?" I asked, not moving to let him in. "Called every resort until I found one with Amanda Caldwell registered." Persistent. "Amanda, please, can we talk?" I paused, then nodded. He entered and stood awkwardly in the middle of the room. "You look good," he said, nodding toward my casual outfit. "Rested." "Amazing what a night away from constant belittlement can do." He winced. "I deserve that." "Yes, you do. Why are you here, Brian?" He exhaled. "To apologize. You were right about everything. The way my family treated you was awful. Worse, I didn't stand up for you." "Why now? Because I made a scene and embarrassed the mighty Caldwells?" "No." He ran a hand through his hair. "After you left, I saw them through your eyes, for the first time. The way they spoke about you, dismissed you, it was disgusting. I realized I've been complicit in something ugly for a long time, not just this week." He moved toward the balcony. "After you left, Dad went straight into damage control. Mom suggested cutting off access to our accounts. James said we should involve lawyers." "And what did you do?" I asked. "I told them all to go to hell." I blinked. "You what?" I said if they couldn't respect you, they didn't respect me. Then I left. Part of me wanted to fall into his arms, but a bigger part stayed still. Words are easy, Brian. Where were you for the past 24 hours? Driving, thinking, wondering what kind of man I want to be, if I'm brave enough to choose you over their approval. He stepped closer. "I want to be worthy of you, Amanda. I want to be your partner. And if my family never accepts you, they're not part of our life. Simple." I searched his face. Was he sincere? "It took me leaving for you to realize this?" "Yes. And I'll regret that forever. But I'm here. Not to control you. Not because I think you overreacted. I'm here because I love you. And I want to rebuild something real." I didn't reply right away. 3 days ago, I would have accepted that apology instantly. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "I need time," I said. "If we try again, we need counseling, together, and you, individually. You've got 32 years of unlearning to do." He nodded. "Whatever it takes." I'm flying home tomorrow. Let's take some space when we're back. Figure out what we both want. He looked pained but didn't argue. I understand. Can I drive you to the airport at least? I thought, then nodded. That's fine. At the door, he paused. I'm proud of you, Amanda, for standing up for yourself when I didn't. You're the strongest person I know. After he left, I sat on the balcony, feeling unexpectedly peaceful. I didn't know if our marriage could be saved, but I'd saved myself. For the first time in this whole exhausting trip, I'd stood up and said, enough. No more silence, no more separate table. 1 week later, Seattle rain tapped gently on the windows as I curled up with tea. After the emotional chaos of the Hamptons, my apartment felt like sanctuary. I'd taken time off work to breathe and reflect. Montauk Point had been a gift, space to remember who I was. After Brian's visit, I journaled every day. I walked on the beach. I turned my phone off for hours, focusing on me. The staff, who'd somehow heard the story, treated me like someone special, small kindnesses that reminded me I mattered. Brian had driven me to the airport as promised. The ride was quiet, but not uncomfortable. At the terminal, he helped with my bags, then handed me an envelope. What's this? I'd asked. A name and number, marriage counselor in Seattle, and a therapist. For me, his voice had been firm. I've already booked sessions for both. It was a small gesture, but it said everything. We agreed to a 3-week separation. Brian would stay at a friend's. I'd stay home. We'd keep communication minimal and focus on our own growth. And Brian kept his word. 3 days after we got back, he started therapy. He texted once. Thank you for forcing me to open my eyes. Then silence, as promised. As I sat with my tea, I felt clarity. I didn't know where things were going, but I knew I was never going back to being the woman who begged for a place at the table. I had found something better. Myself. The first therapy session shook me more than I expected. Facing how much dysfunction I'd tolerated as normal was eye-opening. I'm grateful you pushed me toward this step. I hadn't replied earlier, not out of resentment, but to honor the boundaries we'd put in place. That week had been intense. I'd spent hours talking with Rachel and my sister, unraveling the quiet ways I'd lost myself during my marriage. I reconnected with old friends, revisited hobbies I'd long abandoned, and started piecing back together the parts of me the Caldwells had slowly worn away. Just then, my phone buzzed, my mom checking in. How are you doing today? I smiled and typed, better, clearer, one day at a time. Her reply was instant. That's my girl. Dad and I are always here. Their steady love had been my anchor. The day I flew back from New York, they drove 3 hours from Oregon just to share dinner, no probing, no pressure, just presence. Their warmth only highlighted the stark difference with the Caldwells. Margaret called once, leaving a voicemail so stiff it felt scripted. Amanda, this is Margaret Caldwell. While your conduct at the resort was regrettable, Richard and I are open to discussing a more constructive path forward. Please have Brian contact us when appropriate. I deleted it without a second thought. The most unexpected message came from Stephanie. She emailed me a long, sincere letter about growing up in that rigid household, how she always felt suffocated by their expectations, and how seeing me speak out had encouraged her to make her own changes. I've started therapy too, she wrote. I want to break the cycle before I have kids. We exchanged a few heartfelt emails, real unfiltered connection for the first time. She even suggested we meet up, just us, no Brian or family strings. Meanwhile, Brian and I had our first marriage counseling session lined up for tomorrow. I felt nervous but ready to finally be honest about my needs, my worth, my boundaries. A sudden knock on the door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw Brian, uncertain, holding a small package. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. We had agreed on 3 weeks of separation. Only one had passed. I know we said limited contact, he said, but I found this while packing at my friend's. Thought you should have it now? He handed me a neatly wrapped package in plain brown paper. Inside was a leather journal, just like the one I'd once admired in a bookstore but never bought. Open it, he said gently. Inside the front cover, he'd written, "For documenting our new chapter, if you choose to turn the page with me. Either way, your story deserves to be written." I was deeply moved, not by the gift itself, but by the message. He saw that this choice was mine to make. The old Brian would have assumed we were bound to reconcile. "Thank you," I said, meeting his eyes. "I've been reflecting," he said, standing at a respectful distance. "About Montauk, about who I want to be. I called my parents and told them, if they want to be part of our lives, if there's still an hour, they must acknowledge what they did to you and make real amends." I raised an eyebrow. "How'd that go?" He gave a tight smile. Dad hung up. Mom called back to say I was throwing away my legacy for that marketing girl with no pedigree. I winced, though her insult didn't sting like it once did. "And you?" I asked. I told her that marketing girl has more heart, intellect, and class than their entire family. Then he hung up. Despite everything, I smiled. "Therapy's working already. It's helping me see clearly," he said. "I don't expect this to fix things overnight. I know we've got a long road, if you even want to walk it. But I meant what I said at Montauk. You come first. Always." He started to leave, then paused. "Thanksgiving. If we're still us, maybe we go to your parents'. I've always loved their Thanksgivings." After he left, I sat down, holding the journal. I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. But it was the first time I felt maybe, just maybe, there was something to rebuild. Not what we had before. Something new. Stronger. 3 months later, Brian stood beside me in our bathroom, straightening his tie. "We can still cancel," he offered. I smoothed my dress. "They're your parents. We can't dodge this forever." He nodded, nervous. "I just don't want you hurt again." "They can't hurt me like before," I said. "And you're not the man who'd let them." Counseling had transformed us. We'd relearned how to communicate, dismantled old patterns, and redefined what partnership meant. Today we'd meet his parents for lunch, for the first time since Montauk. Boundaries were set. If crossed, we'd leave. United front. The restaurant was neutral ground. Margaret and Richard arrived. No hugs, only polite handshakes. We exchanged pleasantries until the real conversation began. "Brian says you're in therapy," Richard said with mild disapproval. "Yes," I replied. "It's helped us grow." Our day," Margaret began, "marital problems stayed private." "That's what we're here to address," Brian said. "Amanda is my family now. If you want to be part of our lives, you need to accept that." They looked stunned. Brian didn't back down. He named the disrespect, the cruelty, the manipulative breakfast conversation. They squirmed. Finally, Richard asked, "What do you want from us?" "Respect," I answered. "Not approval, just basic respect." "And if that's hard for us?" Margaret asked. "Then you'll see us less," Brian said calmly, "including future grandchildren." Her facade cracked. "You'd deny us your kids?" "We'd protect them from toxicity," I said. Lunch ended without miracles, but with clarity. For the first time, Brian and I were true partners. 1 year later, it was Christmas Eve. We stayed in Seattle, hosting my parents and sister. Our marriage was stronger than ever. Brian declined a job at his dad's company, choosing a firm that shared his values. His relationship with his parents was cautious but respectful. That night, he handed me a small gift, a silver bracelet with a charm, a tiny table. "To remind us," he said, "you'll never sit apart again. We build our own table now." Tears welled in my eyes. "It's perfect?" Then, hesitantly, "Maybe it's time to talk about expanding our table?" I nodded. What began as a painful unraveling had led us here, not to perfection but to something real, something earned.